Howdy, folks. Welcome to day 2 of the Montana Book Festival. It's great to see you all here. Just some quick housekeeping notes. We have events here at the library today until about 5 p.m., at which point a lot of our events will move down to 121 South Higgins. There we have a little storefront that we've converted into a nice little reading room. We have 3 authors presenting there, Ron Francel, Thomas Mitchell, and M. Lund. These readings are going to be really good, really engaging. Shouldn't miss them. They're $5 at the door unless you've already gotten your button. Okie doke. Born and raised in Billings, Montana, David Overturf has also lived, studied, worked, and lurked in Los Angeles, Florida, Missoula, Chicago, Costa Rica, New York City, Barcelona, and Seattle. He brings Road Trip, Project 1000, Volume 1, to the Montana Book Festival, both a chronicle of his 25,000-mile road trip from Montana to Argentina and an introduction to Project 1000. Heretofore a poet, playwright, short story, and sketch comedy writer, this is his first book. Poet and prose writer Shann teaches leadership and forgiveness studies at Gonzaga University, poetry at Stanford, and poetry for the Center for Contemplative Leadership at Princeton Theological Seminary. A National Endowment for the Arts Fellow, through his research in forgiveness and genocide, he has served as a visiting scholar in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and as a poetry mentor for PEN America Prison and Justice Writers Program. Craig W. Hergert is an internationally renowned panoramic photographer. Beginning in 1997, his Montana Panoramic collection of vast landscapes and mountain ranges, wilderness, rivers, parks, towns, wildlife, hunting, and fishing images from all over the great state of Montana have grown into thousands of images that continues to grow each day. Craig's work is on display in galleries and businesses throughout the nation and in private collections all over the world. Born and raised in Colorado, New Mexico, and Montana, Craig was a budding artist from a young age, drawing, painting, and photographing the ranches, mountains, and rivers he wandered as a child. He studied art and graphic design at MSU while working at a local bronze foundry and landed his first job with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Park that had him roaming the state building interpretive centers at state parks. Alrighty, so part of the reason I brought this panel together was that I think that one thing we lose with presenting these sorts of things, of readings, of communicating through words, is that there are a lot of ways that we tie visual elements into things. Shann's the poet, Craig's the photographer, Dave does both, and has thought a lot about how to combine those things. So I'll kick it off with a question. How do you think, and it's going to be impossibly broad, so just take your interpretive time with it. How do you think that the visual elements and words support each other, and how do you think they're at odds?
I have the mic, so I guess I'll start. I think, I supported myself in Billings as a portrait and architectural real estate. Whatever people would pay me to take pictures of, I would take pictures of that. And I was kind of haunted by this idea I had when I lived in Spain of the marriage of a picture in 1,000 words in 2002. I saw these fancy digital cameras, which is a 3.3 megapixel monster, which you have way better in your pocket right now in your phone. But I thought, for me, I thought it was important to. I felt like I was cheating as a writer because I think I'm more a writer than I was a photographer. I kind of stumbled into photography and started making money at it, and I was a sucker for making money as an artist. So this pays me. So anyway, I developed this program that it occurred to me as I was living in Spain that it would be easy to be in this place and forget, the sights and sounds and smells around me. So it would be really cool to I developed an overseas program for university students that was a semester abroad. and they would come back and whatever they had to do to fulfill their requirements at the college or whatever. For me, the mentor, the leader of the trip over there, would require them to have 10 pictures. Each picture had to have 1,000 words. So they couldn't just numbly experience a place or take pictures and not remember what it smelled or felt like, or the sun or the sound over there, or what happened to get them there. They had to have 1,000 words to go with it. So that's kind of where this was born. It took about 17 years till I dislodged myself from Billings and bought a 2005 Dodge Grand Caravan and drove to the end of South America. And then thought I'd write a book about it and build a website. And so, I don't know, that's so sprawling. You said interpretive sprawling. That's probably more than you asked for.
Why don't you go first?
Go first, all right, sweet. So, yeah, I think the connection between words and image is something beautiful and honored throughout time, and something that, when you're I always work in the late night hours from about 10 until 1 or 2 in the morning, because I never wanted the art to be interrupting the relationship with my wife or my daughters, and then I just made sure I've always had jobs I don't have to get up until 10 or 11 in the morning. So that's what a professor's job is like, as long as you don't have 8 o'clock classes, which I don't. So so that's kind of helped that schedule. But so with Craig and I, this conversation started a long time ago. Hold this for a second, Craig.
Yep, you got it.
Just so you can see one of the pictures. But so these are, Craig's been working as an internationally renowned photographer for probably 25 years now, 30 years. So these are incredibly unique, different situations, places all throughout Montana. And so when we got together, just started to know each other barely, was a long time ago. My wife, Jen, say hi, Jen. Jen bought me a gift because I tend to write about Montana, having been raised in Montana, born in Billings, and lived on the Cheyenne Reservation, and lived in Livingston for high school. And, we were kind of all over Bozeman at different times. And then, so that's a lot of the foundation for my own poetry and my own novels and short stories. But I would always have pictures of Montana spread out on the writing desk, And Jen knew that, and then she saw some of Craig. She didn't know Craig, but she saw one of his, one of these volumes, the first Montana one from many years ago. And she asked him to, write something to me in it, which was very kind of him. And of course, that was the book that I had spread out for 2 or 3 books that I wrote over the years, Just looking at these pages, because it's helpful if you're writing about the Beartooth Range to just actually look at the direct photos, that he takes. So in any case, it was long distance, no real conversation. But the images were so important, to the actual constructing and composing of these lines of poetry or, passages in a novel. And, eventually, I was putting together a website, and I thought it'd be nice to have some of his, photographs. So I emailed him and said, hey, can we do a little artist deal here, and I think I paid him, maybe $300 or something for 27 photos to be featured on the website, that's very low. Like, that amount is very low. And then these photos they're now on the website, and I was looking at them like, I did not pay him nearly enough. So I sent him a check for $500. So, and then he was like, well, why don't you just go ahead and have anything you want from my studio? And I literally, you're kind of in your own world doing these things. I didn't even know he had a studio. So so I looked, and so now Jen and I have actually this one, but he does these so we have this photo in our house in a space that we were always like, what are we going to put in that space? And it's 10 feet by 3.5 feet with these beautiful, old barnwood frame around it, And so if you're interested in, some stuff for your house, this man, his stuff is good. If you're interested in the book, either of these books are on the table, up here on this 4th floor on the back side over there. But this connection, I didn't know, but he, called me and said, I'm putting together this next one, 15-year retrospective, and just asked if I'd be willing to put poems to it. So that became about a 2 or 3 year, collaboration. That was just, what an honor, what a blessing to go through it. And, he did things, I did things. Some of them are written directly to the scenes. Others are from scenes from previous books that I did, And then he sometimes went out after something was written, so he can talk about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Shann. So the picture or 1,000 words. This I think this project kind of goes in that direction quite well, because the majority of this was put together. 75% of it was done, and I felt like it was missing something. And you know, there's only so much you can do. You know, flipping through a photo, looking at the books, or looking at, you know, just it will mean something to you if it means something to you. But I felt like I wanted to combine a little bit more to it than just a sense of place or whatever it was that you were saying. So I contacted Shann initially to say, I would be honored if you would write the foreword for this. And that's where it started. And he did such a great job putting it together. And then I thought, this might be a big ask, but would you mind, like, do you have a few things that just take a look at the pictures, and could you just maybe put a couple little pieces of prose, maybe a short story or two? And he just took he took the reins and just went from there. And it took a while to get it put together, and which piece went with which. But I find now that at least for me, I guess I'm bored of some of the imagery after looking at it for so long that I prefer to go and read it now rather than look at the pictures.
I gotta say, I never get bored of any of these. I get bored of the writing, but I don't get bored of the photos, so that's probably a good match. But just to, it ends up being maybe every 2 or 3 pages throughout the book with some set of poetry on it, and then there's 3 larger pieces in there in between. But so as you looked at this one, you saw these, buffalo, and the sun on the right-hand page kind of coming in. But this is an example of one that was written for this page, not one that came from sort of previous areas. But it says, "At Dry Fork Road, the bison congregated, their massive shoulders bearing woolly heads that weighed over 300 pounds. Horn and eye, skull and silence, the sun star bright behind them." So just, spending time with the photo, and then as poets do, working forever on lines, and then, moving from there.
So that kind of brings me to, one of the big sort of illuminations between both of your works. As you're setting these things to the pictures, what sort of details do you bring out of this? What makes you think of other events? I know in Dave's book, there are several moments that wander through time a little bit away from the actual moment of the photo. And you were talking about setting things that you had previously worked on, finding inspiration together. What are ways do you see that kind of resetting, that sort of wandering through time in both your own work and in your own memories, brings you back to the specific moment of a photograph? Because I think that's the power of photographs. They do not wander in time.
Well, first of all, those photographs are amazing. And on the website, on the Project 1000 website, it says this is not a photography competition or a writing competition. It's about, regular people posting their pictures and giving context to these pictures. So as far as astral projecting or whatever, yeah, because it takes, my whole life, or people's whole lives, have built up to that time that you take that picture. And there's a reason that you took that picture. And there's got to be a story behind it. So I've been doing presentations, and I'm trying to, I live with my mother in Billings. She's 81. And one use of this, I'm doing it as kind of this artistic exercise. Putting this thing together, especially in the last 3 to 5 years in this country, has been really rough on a sensitive, empathetic, like progressive guy like me. So I've been able to rechannel kind of with spiritual, creative aikido and move this stuff into something beautiful to allow other people to create. But live with my mother, I'm trying to get her to write stories of the pictures on the wall, or take a picture of that piece of furniture, because soon those things will be passed down. I don't know the stories of these things. So what is the story behind this picture? And you can kind of cheat, and she can tell stories about furniture by taking a picture of it. But like photo albums, family pictures and stuff like that, what are the memories you have of this picture? So it's really, it lends itself to some real, because it took all our roads that we've taken to get here, and as it is with any picture we take. So it lends itself to some good thought and memory, and archiving it. It's important, I think.
Yeah, hop back on there.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about this piece, so I'll start it. But, it's kind of, Montana's so interesting, isn't it, right? If you've spent any time on the reservations, or if you happen to have, close friends or family members that are of Native nations, that Montana is a kind of a microcosm of all the elements that are happening in America now and that happened from the beginning of America, right? And, some of that is lesser known. So I remember coming across one of Craig's photographs, that's set, along the Big Hole. And I had already, because of my work as a forgiveness and genocide researcher, I had done quite a bit of work on the massacre at the Big Hole, And so there was a piece that would fit that really well. And, kind of noticed what he was doing, photographically, and then re-envisioned the piece a little bit. But that came out of one of the great stories of Montana in the modern day, right? So Robbie Paul, who got her PhD with me at Gonzaga University, I happened to be the chair of her dissertation, and she ended up leading Washington State University's, Native Nations movements for many, many years at Washington State. She's retired now, but anyway, she's Nez Perce, and she basically did her dissertation on tracking 5 generations of Nez Perce leadership from first white contact to today, right? So her, relational sphere includes Chief Joseph and the people that you've heard about, right? But in any case, at that time in Montana, it was during the Indian Wars. So one of the, grave massacres of Native elders, women, and children happened very close to here, along the Big Hole, And there's a whole story behind it, and you can kind of read about it in here too. But in any case, what a lot of people don't know is that the Nez Perce now, today, they welcome the descendants of those who massacred the Nez Perce to meet with the descendants of the ones that were massacred. And so they walk through the dawn carrying these lanterns together, and then they sit in a forgiveness and reconciliation circle. And that's a yearly happening right here in Montana, something very different than we're experiencing in the age of enragement, which might also be the age of I'm upset because I think somebody harmed me, right? So the Nez Perce do something that's transcendent with that, right? And I know you did, I think you did something with the story that I wrote about that, and you can tell.
Yeah, in that one specifically, I had a few images of that area that I had traveled to, and a lot of these images, there's an immense amount of failure. There's an intent to go and capture something, and the word taking a photo, I take that literally when I go there. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking something from the place, but a lot of times it turns out more that I'm given something. And when I arrive at a location and I feel like I'm taking it, nothing ever is produced properly. And the times that I went to shoot here, it never felt right. And then once I had some stuff that was there, but it just wasn't good enough. And once I read his story, I needed to go back. And I literally went and just stayed there for a couple days and got a couple images that I'm happy with, but I still don't feel like I completely connected, but I was definitely given something. And at that point, I felt like it connected a bit more. Yeah.
These take a second to wake up. I'm sorry, folks. I actually have a question specifically for Craig here for just a moment. So Craig, you go out to these places, you set up, you find the photograph. What stories are you looking for when you go to take these panoramas?
It depends. A lot of times it's location based. I'll want to go and learn about an area or a spot that I hadn't been to before, or something that I wanted to see. And so literally it all began as just an excuse to take a road trip. And then a lot of times before this, it was just road trips, and then I would forget about them. So I have to document this. And I also, as a young man and into college, I wanted to be a painter, and I would go out and take pictures to paint from, to use them as reference. And then I found that I enjoyed the actual process of taking the photos more so, and it just kind of evolved into that. Now I'm actually transitioning back into painting a bit more, which is a whole nother story. But the original question was, how do I decide? I really don't. Sometimes it's a random bit where someone will ask me if I've been to a place or if I have a photo. I love when I get questions from people who are say, well, I grew up outside of X place on a ranch. We moved away. Do you have any photos of this place? I want to have a photo of that at my home where I now live in Chicago. And so I'll say, oh, I've never been there, but I'll go and I'll see if I can get something for you. So it's a combination of multiple things.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
So can you tell them about, you take these, I mean, first we got to say too, this library is probably like your second home since it's a panoramic library. But in any case, you take these in a lot of different ways, right? Like you hike, you horseback. I mean, and isn't there maybe helicopters or something? Or
In some cases, yes. For the most part, it is a lot of it is truck and a truck camper and just hitting the road, and that ends up being a base camp where I can stay in a spot for a few days, and then I'll hike or ride, whatever the case might be to get to the spot. As you mentioned prior, there was a good section of time, especially when my kids were younger, where I took a lot of architecture and ranch gigs to take photos of to pay the bills, and that a lot of those included getting in planes and helicopters and all kinds of stuff. So I justified it by getting the job done and then hiring the helicopter to take me the rest to get shots that I wanted at the same time, so I could sleep better at night.
would you sleep in the truck?
Yeah, I'd sleep in the truck camper these days. It's basically an apartment that you bring with you at all times. Like it's not roughing it at all. It's quite comfortable. So, yeah.
Dane Barr, who was reading on Sunday with Gwen Florio, he's a mystery author. And he came up here in his truck, and he was so excited to show me his truck bed sleeping situation. And it's really slick. Some of you might know I worked at Home Resource for a long time, and that was a primary project for folks. I'm speaking of travel. Dave, do you want to talk about some of your experiences traveling through South America and kind of like what that was like as like someone who's a creative, but also someone who has to manage the material concerns of maintaining a Dodge Caravan down the Pan American Highway?
It had a king bed in it, didn't it?
Yeah, king bed. They had a slim single. It was, and that's generous. How many stories? Oh, Sam. There's a book you can read, but I'll say, it's been interesting to, I've kind of been a creative Unabomber. I was out in Seattle. I got this free gig to live in this house that was falling apart, family, friends, but it was right on Puget Sound in Beery in Washington. And it didn't have heat. And the guy's like, it's in pretty bad shape, man. I said, hey, as luck would have it, I'm going out there to write a book on a road trip I took for 16 months and lived in a van, so I'll be okay. I underestimated 40 degrees on the ocean in Seattle. And had to order foot warmers and hand warmers and stuff. Anyway, it's been interesting, to bring this out. This is kind of my coming out time. This was published mid-July, and I'm just now kind of getting out and introducing people to the book, which introduces people to the website and this whole little world that I've been a mad creative scientist on my own. But in answer to your question, I've had. It's been interesting, the interactions in different places in Montana. I was telling some friends on the way up, the molecules feel different to me in Missoula. And these are my old stomping grounds. I got a classmate here. We studied, we got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting right across the river. And so this was a home to me. And it feels different than Billings, Montana. And yeah, so I've been out and I went to a Rotary Club, which is different, for kind of a guy like me. My grandfather was in it in Bozeman, and my father in Billings. But I got done with this presentation that has, I had a GoPro camera that was mounted on the windshield wiper, and ended up coming back with 28,000 photos and 4,000 videos, and then kind of putting that all together. I mean, it's been a thing, and. But to talk to get through this, and then there's a component of Project 1000 that I'm going to talk with Shann about, of sessions where we try to offer accountability groups and kind of, nourishing kind of writing clubs, like an hour a week for 6 weeks or something like that. At the end, there's a presentation where the person gets to stand there and their image is projected and they read their 1,000 words. There's got to be some presentation in it, right, Julie? We got to get them up. But after all that, and there's this really moving. I did the first session in Nogales, Mexico last fall at a migrant shelter, and I didn't see that coming. The first session, I've been trying to do these things, and it happened at a migrant shelter. I speak Spanish. I'm a former Spanish teacher. Really helped with the road trip. But these 5 kids that were fleeing and huddled up there at the border from various varying degrees of hell, really. And I got them to write 1,000 words in 3 days. So after going through all that, this guy in Rotary said, "Man, you went through some really dangerous areas. How'd you do that?" And I'm like, I'm sober, 27 years. I speak Spanish. Those are big things. I think a language is the ultimate form of respect for a culture. It's really hard to be a jerk to someone who speaks your language. Or is at least trying, and I'm more than try at it. But I said, and then I get in the weeds a little bit, and I said, I never felt in danger going to a grocery store, or a concert, or a church, or a parade, So, and then I think he kind of got the point, and I got back into my lane a little bit. But and then some lady yesterday, I was speaking at a group here, and. She said, "Is there any place you wouldn't go? Any place you wouldn't go again?" And I said, "I don't know, because I don't know how to parse that, because one of the themes of the book is that there's way more good people than bad people, and it was like that all the way down, and especially a country like Colombia, where it has all this mala fama, is what they call it in Spanish, disrepute, and they got the Escobar, Pablo Escobar, all this cocaine and all this, and they had their issues, but it was very few people just created havoc for the entire country and gave them a bad name. But a lovely country filled with just awesome people. I mean, it was no different anywhere. I'm glad I didn't do too much research in countries like El Salvador and Honduras, but I was invited to maybe bypass those countries or get through as fast as I could, but I didn't. As kind of a testament or a stance to the universe and for people that it seemed really to shame that culture in that country to say, I'm just going to blow through you as fast as I could, and I didn't, and I'm glad. But she said, Where would you not go? And I don't know how to answer that, because those bad places, whatever, or rough roads or whatever, led to beautiful places, and it was all connected. And I can't take the good without the bad. And one of the themes is bad roads lead to beautiful views. So yeah.
I'm gonna going over to Shann here. Shann, a lot of your poetry and prose in this book is it's spare. It's very evocative. The words you choose and the placement and the setting of them against these photographs tell a lot. But I guess I'm wondering, is that sort of your normal mode, or did you not want to stray too far into what the photographs were saying on their own?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just for me, when I look at a project, I'm trying to receive what's given. And so in this one, it just seemed like this is such a unique photographic essay without any words. It's just so unique and so powerful, especially for anybody that's lived in Montana or grown up in Montana, or maybe any of, your places, what I would call your home of soul, And so when I was looking, I thought this would be it would be nice to maybe build something that is not direct, but indirectly is basically women and men and a human family in some type of progression through this book, So it certainly has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it doesn't read like a novel or anything like that. It's more like some type of subtlety that's speaking to the feminine and the masculine in each of us, and its journey across landscape or within landscape, So once I sort of had that idea, then that was what coalesced the way that I would approach different things. So you know, if you end up having the book, you'll see, you know, basically something like childhood, you know, and growing into middle years and then into later years for women and men together. And it's framed like a family. So something like that. It's not, I tried to not think too hard about it, just let it kind of come out, you know. And so, yeah, that was the guiding principle.
So I know that all of you have actually had to have your hands in a lot of stages of this book. You know, it wasn't like submit your manuscript and then it comes back out. So I just kind of want to hear what some of your experiences were putting together these books. Dave's self-published. You have a kind of a smaller press, and so that's something that a lot of authors here maybe don't get to experience quite as closely.
Totally. When it's an independent project, I kind of love independent projects because you're together with whoever you're with are the ones that are going to see, is this going to be able to come out how you hope it'll come out? And that journey has a lot of ups and downs and a lot of funny things. You know, like I remember Craig, you know, and my wife read it too, and Craig's wife read it, and Craig's wife she's like very detailed, and she found like a number of things that I had wrong since 6th grade about certain words. So that's kind of helpful, right? You're like, oh man, I'm glad your wife read that. That was great. You know, like I always misspell, you know, one of the constellations every time, you know. And so she's like, oh yeah. But anyway, there's this joy of kind of bringing it together. But Craig really did almost all of it as far as like what happens with the actual galleys and everything that then eventually comes into publication. So love to hear you talk about that.
Sure. For me, it's a combination project where I went to school at MSU for graphic design, and also a bit in New Mexico, at Eastern New Mexico as well. And so I had it was also my job when I first got out of college, working for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and then subsequently for the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, and then for a company called Big R, which is now Murdoch's. So I had this graphic design marketing base, and when it came time for me to publish my first book and started shopping it out to, you know, it's just a few publishers. There's Far Country, you know, there were a couple here, because it's a very niche product to have photographs of Montana. This was 1997 to 2007 that I put the first collection together, and no one was interested, you know. And so it came just out of necessity. Well, I'll just do this myself. And saved up, and luckily, you know, at that time it was kind of the starting block for self-publishing a bit more. There was less middleman. You didn't have to go through traditional avenues, and so it was a huge gamble on my part to come up with a large chunk of change that I didn't have necessarily at the time. And so I went through that with the first one, and it was successful. And successful in a photography book about Montana is that it pays for itself, and maybe there's a little profit at the end of it. That's about it. But it was successful in my mind just from getting it out there to people, which was the idea, was just I wanted people to see what I've been working on. And that in itself was the gratification. But then on this next project, I knew it would just be the same to, you know, to do it all myself. And I had a little bit of help. I had a graphic designer that I've known for 20 years who helped me with a lot of the details, because I was so focused on the content and merging it with Shann that I didn't want to deal with the actual graphic design part of it anymore, and so hired that out, and that definitely helps. But the whole encompassing project, I mean, it's, as you know, the editing alone, I mean, it's just, good thing Shann does nights. I do mornings a lot of times. I'm a 3 to 8 in the morning. I have to have that quiet time, and then sometimes
Drop it off at 2:45, and then
yeah, and then I take off. He goes to sleep at 2. I start at 3, and then take a nap, and then go again late that night, because that's really because it just takes you know an immense amount of time that it doesn't pay. But the rewards are immeasurable when you finally have that smell of when it comes off the press and it's done, and there's nothing quite like it.
Mine's a different process. So, yeah, I finished my first draft last summer 2021, and it had 55 images with 1,000 words each. And it ended up, I came back with, aside from the 28,000 pictures, 4,000 videos, 150,000 words of notes from a road trip. So I was a busy little boy. Those wheels got a lot of stuff in motion. And that first draft had a lot of minutia in it. So there's 55 images with 1,000 words, and it was a deep dive. It was more for like people who might want to do this. like this is how far it is from here to here, and this is where I stayed. And my editor, John Byorth, he lives in Livingston now, and old family friend, and got a degree from the law school here, and he we talked about it, and there was just a bit too much minutia, and it kind of it was interesting with him too, because he's edited like he used to be an editor for an outdoor magazine, and he's edited or published 400, 800 articles, some crazy number, and he's helped people with books, and he was worried about narrative and voice and themes in this thing. I'm like, he finally kind of heard me, I think, after maybe he read the first draft or when it was completed, that it was not really about narrative, and there might be themes come up, but the nature of this thing, to try to sculpt this thing into like some sort of structured narrative, was kind of defeating the purpose of Project 1000. I said, I wager to say that there's an arc in every 1,000 words. I'm not the same person I was before and after I took that picture, and this is the story that tells and it can bring up stuff from childhood and whatever I'm being confronted with or needing to change in that moment. Anyway, I said I think these things will take care of themselves, and I'm going to drive myself crazy trying to tie this all together with a narrative. It's like, it's kind of chronological, but this is what happened, and this is the context of this picture and this picture, and it's pretty much all the way down.
How did you, so all these words you're writing, where did they happen? Like, what was how did you set they had to take place how?
The images?
In your, in your van.
Oh yeah, these notes I would take, and it was really like stupid. I think it was just memory stuff, so I could create this. It was literally like, I paid this much for gas here or whatever, or I stayed here. This drunk guy came in. This bird. I woke up with a hummingbird on my rearview mirror, or this part of the road, or these people that I passed. And some of the stuff literally made it in. I copied some entries from that journal, the travel journal, into the book, but most of it's kind of a reflection back and giving context, because we don't know context right now. It often takes distance and time to look back and say, oh, that's kind of what that meant, and that'll probably change. I'd probably write a different book here in another 2 years, you know what I mean, about what the real context was or what would happen later. And it's like, oh. But anyway, it ended up being 29 pictures of 1,000 words, and I never sent the second draft to the editor. We just kind of decided that you're good, and I had a proofreader look at it, because the website, I'm the only moderator for the website, so when someone creates an account and uploads a submission, which is a picture in 1,000 words, I don't edit it, I don't critique it. I'm like, is it spam? Is it just too insane for anything? And if it's got 1,000 words and it's not spam and it's not extremely vulgar, I don't know what to do exactly with moderation on that. It goes to the website. I have no interest in critiquing, and with these sessions that I'm proposing, Sam knows, because I was lucky enough to I believe teach him in acting, if not direct him for years in plays and in Billings. But I never want to force people to get to a place, and so it is with writers. I want to provide that opportunity and maybe a framework for them to express themselves and tell their own stories in their own words. So that's kind of the spirit of this thing, and it wasn't that second draft just got a proofreading, and they missed a couple. So it was it's kind of an out of the van project, right? But it's pretty good, yeah.
So I kind of just want to go down the line, because we've been talking a lot about travel and experience and note taking and learning things and gaining knowledge. if you could plan one trip right now with no encumbrances, what direction, where to, and why?
Well, a real person, a real man, they say, but a real person would have traveled from Alaska to the end of South America. I'll just say real quick that I thought I was really something until I got to the last stop before the end of the road in Ushuaia, Argentina, and that bastard showed up, and he had ridden a bicycle from Homer, Alaska. I'll repeat that. He'd ridden a bicycle from Homer, Alaska. And I was like, come on, man. Let me feel good right now. It was awesome. But I think it would be quite refreshing to drive from South Africa to Mongolia. What's up?
Yeah, both of those sound really good. I am looking for a supporter on this new trip that David and I are going to do this year. Mongolia. I love actually what you did. I think heading south sounds spectacular with a stop in the Caribbean on a sailboat possibly. Some sort of meandering around there. Really, I don't care what it is. It's one of my favorite things to do is to prepare, pack up, and go. And sometimes the preparation is part of the fun. And then with almost no planning, I want it to just come as it comes, it goes. So I'm open.
What David failed to mention was then he asked the cyclist, like, how many photos you got? And the dude only had 2. No. Yeah, I would say I miss Mystic Lake. And so I would go Mystic Lake first, and then Sylvan Lake, which is a very difficult hike, but in a Beartooth. Haven't been there for too long to both of those places, so I'd go there with a loved one, preferably Jennifer.
I just want to tell Craig that there's no land crossing between Panama and Colombia. Some people do a roll-on, roll-off ferry with their vehicles, but the most economical is to put your vehicle in a container, a 40-foot container, share it with somebody. And there are fancy people who take sailboats from Panama to Colombia.
So we're kind of in the final quarter of this. So I thought it might be nice if we actually shared some things from this book. Like, so Dave, if you start with a selection from your book, show the photograph, and then read the words connected to it, and then I'll have Shann do something similar with some selections from his.
This is one called Mark, and it'll kind of tell the whole story, but that's all you need to know right now is Mark. And I also, in the spirit of Project 1000, on the website, it shows that picture, and then it has the 1,000 words, and then after the words, it shows the picture again, because I wager to say that you're going to have an impression of this guy right now that might change after you hear the words. Am I reading all 1,000?
Yep.
Roll. All right. After 4 days with friends in Playa del Carmen, Trevor flew down to Cancun, and we spent a few nights off the coast on Isla Mujeres and a few more on Caye Caulker, Belize. I hadn't seen Trev since just after high school, and yet he was one who had reached out when I announced my upcoming road trip on social media now 4 months ago. He introduced me to his friends who showed us around on both islands. In between, we stayed in Tulum, where we toured great ruins and discovered what would become my favorite cenote, Dos Ojos. He brought a young buck coworker from Santa Barbara. We nicknamed him Mamba and had to pull him out of a tight spot he had gotten himself into while hustling for some cocaine on Caye Caulker. They returned north back to Cancun, and I continued south. First, there were a few nights in Hopkins at Palmetto Grove, part cultural center, part eco-fishing lodge centered around the past, present, and culture of the Garifuna people, a mix of African slave descendants, indigenous inhabitants of and around the Caribbean island of St. Vincent, and their indigenous conquerors who had arrived from mainland Central America. Pockets of their 600,000 people could be found in St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the United States. I rattled down dirt roads on a rented bicycle, past small, sad shacks and simple stores and cafes. A bit out of town was a charming little library, opposite a huge open field half filled with cars and trucks and tents and people. As my life would have it, on the exact day I was there, at the precise time I passed by, I had stumbled upon the 13th annual Hopkins Kite Festival. It seems that the more one puts themselves out there, the better chances of good timing. There were parents and children and dogs and food and drink. There was chatter, laughter, concentrating faces and giggles and shrieks of children. Community folk sat at long tables sharing what I assumed to be their most recent Hopkins gossip. I shot videos and stills of this most beautiful event. The Hummingbird Highway stretches just 86 kilometers, 54 miles from the Western Highway, near the capital of Belmopan, to the Southern Highway, continuing onto the coast at Dangriga. It is just as lovely as it sounds, and one of the very few roads on which I did backtrack. I spent a few nights and camped in the parking lot of a hotel in Plasencia. In exchange for a rather expensive meal, I was allowed to park and have my run of the outdoor area, pool, shower, patio, and chairs. Plasencia was much more upscale than Hopkins. They shared some of the same shacks, but there were also nice homes, businesses, etc. There were more people and a more visible divide between rich and poor. I wandered about, was stopped in my tracks by a jazz man's ramped-down version of Hey Joe, and caught up on writing and went with the special of the day, Meatloaf, at the Pickled Parrot. The highlight of Plasencia were the nights at the ocean's edge, beholding the waves and the sand lit up by the moon. I headed back onto the Hummingbird Highway, which led me to my second, San Ignacio, and Mark. Mark was an inspired, outspoken lunatic, angel/prophet/troublemaker from Quebec, Canada. We met next to a bridge where overlanders sometimes camped. He was the exact thing I needed at a time I didn't realize I needed anything at all. He was at the end of what was a usual gig for him, buying a car in the southwestern U.S., driving to Mexico or Belize, then selling it off to pay for the trip. He said it helped with his periodic depression and had much good advice on routes, places, and practices. He told me the tale of a man who had appeared on a road in Mexico, claiming he had been waiting for him. Mark swore he had already encountered that same man thousands of miles before. He told of guns being pulled on him in Guatemala and how he was good either way, as he had lived a blessed, full life. We walked into San Ignacio together. He chided a man for being from South Africa and told his girlfriend from London that he hated the place. Minutes later, as a dreadlock panhandler approached us on the street, Mark opened up his arms and bellowed, "Are you God?" Both interactions somehow ended with smiles and laughter. Boisterous and blustery, there was no keeping a low profile around this cat. And yet he possessed a sort of force field of playfulness, goodness, and humanity. One got the sense that he was immune from harm. He was a strange hero, a man who had long since detached himself from societal norms and the expectations and perceptions of others. I had come far on this front, but still had a ways to go. People like him help. I recorded our conversation during a short drive we took to the border of Guatemala and back. And just like that, he was gone. Our paths joined for less than 18 hours. If I didn't have photographs and recordings of our time together, I might wonder if he had been real at all. 3 months later, I uploaded a video of my first 6 months on the road. The video slowly dissolves from white into a faint recollection of Mexico 1, whereupon these words are spoken by Mark. "This road is never ending. You'll find that as you travel. You're always on a road. And you're wondering, does the road ever stop? Of course not. It keeps going round and round, because then it leads to a harbor. And then you put that car on the ship, and then that road, and to another road, and it's never ending. I think life is like that. It's never ending. We just become something else, whatever that is."
Oh, that's beautiful, David. Great. So a little selection from the forward and then a couple of pages. In Montana, no history goes on unheard. In family or friendship and the nature of the wild, The rugged beauty of the high country, the stark beauty of the plains, the towns and small cities, Cohagen of 8 people, Miles City of 10,000, Plentycoo more than 100, Bozeman tens of thousands, Browning, Hart Butte, Wolf Point, Lame Deer, Melstone, Deer Lodge, Red Lodge, Lodge Grass, Circle, Big Timber, Shoto. In Montana, skies run from a tilted wooden porch all the way to the horizon line, and nothing keeps back the dawn. Cars from the reservations, dirty white trucks, yellow buses packing in hundreds, carting fans to basketball games in midwinter. The sons of trappers and the daughters of sheep shearers, the children sleeping in the back seat of an Eldorado on a day-long drive to Glacier. White crosses and 2s or 5s at the bends of this 2-lane mountain are nearly transparent in the backlight. Everyone who has ever come here remains. The land and the vault of sky are everything, and people so insignificant we are struck in my family by the idea that God doesn't owe us anything. This is the Montana I know. This is the Montana I've been known by. Many of us consider Montana a home of soul. Here, under skies clear or brooding, along miles of back road, walking the fringe of forests, we are together in our varied towns, over land and along riverbeds, up switchbacks, or among wetlands, stippled, gritty, graceful, unnerving, welcoming. I'll never forget the days with my father, thick layer of clouds surrounding the peak up high to our right, rounded, massive shoulder of granite, forested at the base beneath the cloud cover, treeless and rocky at the top where it breaks free, crowned in dawn's light. Birds fly in the drafts there, gold dark eagles. To the south, the cloud bank thins and open sky reaches from the slight promontory where we stand with our hands to our sides looking out. Down the draw of scrub pine and mottled veins of sage, blown timothy grass bent to the earth, and everything converging along the silver blue of the big river. Out from there, the sweep of the valley, the 4 directions, the compass rose, and far to the south, a landmass like the broad back of a giant sleeper. The air comes from the north, chill and fast from the Great Gap of Canada, down the channel from Glacier over the western mid-Montana plains to the mountains again, the line that unites the Beartooths, the Bridgers, the Spanish Peaks, and blind northeast behind us, the Crazies. A bold land, cerulean forms of 3 plateaus, met by the high bulk of this singular mountain. Gold swept among blue, and in the shadowed valley, the brown and tan of earth and grasses bound to the mercury of river water. Boulders like crumbled towers, and sky bigger, flung out more bold than all. The land takes us and holds us. This is where my father scattered my grandmother's ashes. His mother, who raised him of Montana too. The land delivers us, we contemplate what we see. Some say God didn't owe us anything, but he gave his most beloved. These mountains, this sky, this river, they remind me in contemplating beauty, we are drawn toward those we love. And when love makes a home in us, our lives are never the same. So that, and then this one, thank you, appreciate it. And so it was really enjoyable to kind of do certain things with certain pieces. So you can't quite see it here, but if you pick it up, you'll see all this light. And Craig's really a master of light, as a photographer. And you'll see throughout the photos, there's all kinds of different light, all kinds of refraction. And so in this one, I just wrote, the treasure state, unlike other states, is where light is made of gold. So kind of fun to mess with the Montana history a little bit. And then this one, in honor of Jen, which is always fun to read something for you, Jen. So many of you have been here on Going to the Sun Road in Glacier. And see that, right? It's a little hard to balance, but there we go. So this says, if you walk to Sunrift Gorge or Avalanche Lake, many of us have walked to Sunrift Gorge or Avalanche Lake. If you walk to Sunrift Gorge or Avalanche Lake or just drive up Going to the Sun Road in late June, July, the wildflowers, like so many coveted women, or like my wife, self-possessed and funny enough to call herself the hand of God, will take you and make you forget the pain of this world.
All right, folks, we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
I guess for either of the photographers, when you complete a project like this and you look back on it, and you have the satisfaction of it being done, but you lived through it do you ever have a favorite image that you've taken that you think that really made the project?
The question was, as we look back on the photos, if any of the imagery, if we can identify some of them as the favorites. I would say, you know, for me, a lot of them are, there are a few that I can just recognize as that photo turned out better than I had expected, or that it was better than I had hoped for. And I can appreciate it on a technical sense, but more so on the other side, the ones that mean more to me are the ones that there's a story that goes along with it that only I know, that where I failed getting that photo 27 times, or and it finally presented itself at one point, or I got it the first time out there, just completely lucky. Arrived right on time, the light was perfect. And so I'll recognize that as that was my favorite because it was the most rewarding. But it's not necessarily, it's more of a memory for me as opposed to what the viewer might see.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing as Craig. I didn't do this. People ask me about the food, or whatever, food and lodging or whatever. I did it for the mission of doing it. You know what I mean? I did it to hit the end of the road. And as far as images go, it kind of goes along with my previous comments about places or places I wouldn't go again. It's all kind of tied together for me. So, you know, when people ask me about my favorite place or something like that, like Craig, you know, I only had an all-in-one camera. It was a fairly nice Sony, you know, adjustable, but there was no lens. There was no detachable lens. It was all-in-one. I didn't want to bring my big guns out there on the road, and it would just take too much time. So I don't think it's the photograph, you know, for me that did it. I was not into it was not a travel log or anything like that. It wasn't a photography expedition, but it was the places that moved me. You know what I mean? When people say, what was your favorite places? It was those, you know, I think of Guatemala, a place called Semuchampe, or you know, various places along the way. But each, you know, there's so many photographs that have their own place, and I think it was what happened in that place and why I took that picture that's more important, you know. Oh yeah, I'll be at the exhibitor fair at the ZAC tomorrow from 10 a.m. To 2 p.m. for more chatting and propaganda. And then my personal read is at 4 p.m. somewhere up here tomorrow.
And
Sure, yeah, we have a reading and presentation today at 5 o'clock somewhere in the library here. The next room over, I believe.
In the Blackfoot room past the Fact and Fiction.
Okay.
It's a smaller room. It's kind of permanently set up like a boardroom, but it also has, like, I think the best visual presentation for this kind of stuff. Like a nice, like, high quality screen instead of a projector.
And you'll see, you know, the images in real life then, you know, so that'll be great.
All right, folks, thank you so much for coming out to this. We've got a bunch of other events here today.
Great to be, thank you all. And we'll be signing if anybody wants anything on the table back there.
Yeah.